Welcome back, episode 3 of the Healing Happens podcast. I am so excited to be back here with you as we continue our journey of defining and demystifying common healing words and phrases. So today I want to break down somatic. This is another one that I'm just like, oh, gag me. I hear it 24/7. So we hear, somatic, soma, somatics, somatic experience, somatic release, somatic practices, somatic therapy, somatic embodiment, somatic experiencing, all of these things. So I first want to talk about just the root word soma, and sort of the word somatic in general. And then we can kind of expand our discussion into, how it's used in some of these different contexts. So let's take a deep breath. All right, I'm going to get some water. Get some water if you need. Get some tea, kick back, relax. We're gonna settle this once and for all. Don't worry. So, soma. I believe the root word soma comes from the Greek language. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's a Greek root. The word soma refers to the body. And specifically, so somatic refers to the body as separate from the mind. So somatic practices are practices that are rooted in our felt sense, embodied experience, as opposed to a mental experience, which is awesome. Somatic therapies are incredible. And as I touched on a little bit in the first episode about, the word healing, ultimately, trauma cannot be healed with the mind. Trauma is not an intellectual experience. Trauma is a somatic experience. It is an embodied experience, and we store trauma in the body. And so we're never going to talk our way out of trauma, because talk therapy keeps us in the verbal processing and intellectual part of the mind. So the invention, well, it's really not an invention, that's the thing. So animals use somatic therapies all of the time, and they use these practices in real time. So it's been observed that when an animal in the wild goes through a traumatic experience, such as, being chased by a predator and they feel that their life is threatened, they will, once they know that they're safe, they will shake. They'll shake that experience off, and that helps them deactivate their trauma response, get back into their body, move that trauma through the body so it's not stored later. Because trauma is relative. Two people can go through the exact same experience. One of them becomes traumatized by it. They might develop PTSD or something like this. And the other person who lived through the exact same experience had the capacity in their body and their nervous system to metabolize that experience as it was happening, so it does not get stored in the body as trauma. So there is also a big difference between a traumatic experience, or just a life experience that might be traumatic to some people, and what we think of as trauma, which is what we carry with us, what we carry forward, what we live with on a daily basis. But back to soma, the body, somatic practices that are rooted and centered in the body and, our embodied experience as opposed to a mental exercise. But this word is just so overused now. Again, you cannot be in this space and not hear somatic 24/7. And I think it is very important to keep in mind that many people are just using this word as a sales tactic and don't have a whole lot of embodied experience with what it means to guide and facilitate somatic therapies for others, and really don't have much embodied experience of actually moving through trauma somatically like they claim that they do. So I think it's just really important to be discerning and be very aware of who you are trusting to take you into the depths of these parts of you that are very tender and that need a lot of holding and a lot of love and a lot of care. And, in many cases, it takes training to learn how to work with someone's nervous system, how to work with their various trauma responses and things like this. So something I see a lot is, people talking about somatic experience. So somatic experience and somatic experiencing are two different things. So somatic experiencing is a specific trauma healing modality, and practitioners of this particular modality have gone through a 3-year extensive training program and learned the tools and techniques of this particular modality and learned how to use somatic experiencing to help people renegotiate trauma and heal. I personally am a quarter of the way through my somatic experiencing training. I'm loving it. I'm learning so much. I'm incorporating this modality as I learn it in bits and pieces with my clients. I'm adding somatic experiencing to the modalities that I already use with my clients, and it's been incredibly, incredibly effective. But somatic experiencing is a registered trademark of that particular training program, and it's a specific modality. And I said in episode 0, and it is true, I don't really get too hung up on certifications and registered trademark and like this specific training and that specific training. But for the purposes of this, I think it's really important because that is a very specific modality. And unless you've gone through that 3-year training program, you are not trained to be guiding that specific modality. I'm not saying that you can't be an amazing practitioner of other techniques. I'm not saying you can't be incredible at helping people heal. But if you're going to be saying somatic experiencing, just make sure you really know what that means. Now, when we talk about someone's somatic experience, what we're talking about there is their embodied experience would be another way of saying that, or their felt experience, or the experience of being in their body. So that is just a more general term to describe your embodied experience, what you've been through, how it felt for you, what sensations are present. And in various trauma healing techniques, when we work with somatic modalities, we are working through components of your somatic experience. Different than somatic experiencing. I know this gets confusing. And then, of course, the word somatic is used by lots of practitioners to describe a whole wide variety of different healing modalities. I mean, at the end of the day, asana yoga practices really are a somatic healing technique. It is a way of using the body to release, to heal, of developing a relationship with your body, all of those kinds of things. Embodied movement, intuitive movement, dance. One of my absolute favorite healing modalities is twerking. And I teach twerking as the healing modality in my Shake Your Chakras workshops with my ladies. So there are an infinite number of ways to incorporate somatic practices and somatic healing modalities into your repertoire. But I think it's important to be very, very crystal clear that there are certain modalities that are very specific and are meant to be worked with in a very specific kind of way. And it can be overwhelming to just hear somatic 24/7. That's another one of those words that I've developed such an aversion to. Like when I open my phone and I'm scrolling and it's like somatic this and somatic that, I'm just like, oh my God. But incorporating some sort of somatic practice into your treatment program for healing trauma and, becoming more comfortable in your body and practicing nervous system regulation and all of these things is incredibly important. So when you hear the word somatic, just know that they are referring to something that has to do with the body, which they're contrasting with something like talk therapy, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, psychoanalysis, all this kind of stuff. Those are more intellectual processes. They're more verbal processes. They don't have this embodied component. So there's talk therapy, and then there's somatic therapy. And under the somatic umbrella, there are an infinite number of modalities. There's breath work, there's dance, there's intuitive movement, there's EMDR, there's somatic experiencing. The list goes on and on. There's core energetics, there's all these kinds of things. And so I think it's important to really explore, the difference between these modalities and which ones work for you and which methods in combination work for you. For me personally, I guide and facilitate asana yoga, primarily yin, because it works with fascia, most specifically, which is the tissue that stores most of our trauma in the body. So opening that tissue through yin yoga is a really powerful way of helping to release trauma from the body. I work with yin yoga, dance, movement. I do some pretty vigorous breathwork techniques that have worked really well for me. So I use breathwork with a lot of my clients, and I'm now incorporating somatic experiencing as well as a lot of other nervous system regulation tools and techniques. So I am always here for having a smorgasbord of modalities, because some work better in certain situations and others work better in other situations. At some point, I think I'll do an episode about my view on catharsis and cathartic modalities and how that's kind of shifted of late for me. But that'll be coming in a later episode. But for now, I just want to make sure that when we're all on the same page, and all that somatic really means is practices, tools, modalities that are rooted in the body versus rooted in the mind. Other than that, take your pick on which somatic modalities you'd like to use. But be mindful of people who use specific terminology that they're not actually trained in, because it's always a little bit of a red flag as far as I'm concerned. All right, sending you much love, and I'll see you soon for episode 4.